Ever dreamed of living in ancient Rome? The majestic Colosseum, the Grand Forum, the triumphant arches. It's a picture of power, glory, and civilization. We see it in movies, in art, in our history books. A city of marble, gold, and endless sunshine. But what if I told you that the Rome you imagine is only half the story? What if behind that gleaming facade lay a reality that was far more gritty, chaotic, and frankly dangerous than you could ever imagine? Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to reveal the raw, unfiltered truth of daily life in the heart of the Roman Empire. This isn't the Rome of emperors and poets. This is the Rome of the everyday person. Let's step back in time, not just to see the glory, but to experience the reality. Imagine waking up, not in a spacious villa, but in a small, cramped room at the top of a rickety apartment building, an insula. The first light of dawn barely pierces through a tiny, grimy window, illuminating a blizzard of dust particles dancing in the air. The walls are cracked plaster, the floor is cold, hard earth, and your bed is a simple mat of straw. The sounds of the city are already starting to filter in shouting from the streets below. The rumble of carts, the constant hum of a million lives packed together. This isn't a peaceful awakening. It's a daily jolt back into a world of survival. These insulae were the skyscrapers of their time, towering up to 6 or 7 stories high. But they were built quickly and cheaply, often by landlords looking to maximize profit. They were notorious fire traps, constructed with timber frames and poorly mixed concrete. Cracks snaked up the walls, and the wooden balconies would groan under the weight of too many families. Living here meant living with the constant low-level fear that the floor beneath you could give way, or that a neighbor's cooking fire could engulf the entire block in minutes. Fleeing a collapsing building wasn't a scene from a disaster movie. It was a terrifyingly real possibility for the Roman urban poor. Once you're out on the street, the sensory assault truly begins. The grandeur of the Forum from a distance is one thing, but being in it is another. As you push your way through the crowd, the sheer scale is overwhelming. Giant marble columns soar towards the sky, but down on the ground, it's chaos. The air is thick, with the dust kicked up by thousands of sandals, the smell of sweat, unwashed bodies, and the smoke from countless sacrifices and food stalls. Merchants scream their prices, politicians bellow speeches from the rostra, and legionary guards shove people aside to clear a path for some passing dignitary. There's no personal space, no quiet moment. It's a relentless, seething mass of humanity, hungry. You'd probably head to a thermopolium, the ancient equivalent of a fast food stand. But forget modern hygiene standards. The food is laid out in open-air counters, buzzing with flies. The hands serving you are likely unwashed. That piece of bread might have mold on it, and the fish stew simmering in the pot could be made from yesterday's catch or the day before's. Food poisoning wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a constant and potentially lethal risk. For many Romans, every meal was a gamble. Contaminated food and water were a primary cause of the dysentery and typhoid that ravaged the city's population. Let's talk about the streets themselves. Step away from the main thoroughfares and you enter a different world. The alleys behind the majestic temples are dark, narrow, and filled with filth. Piles of garbage rot in the corners, attracting stray dogs and vermin. There are no sanitation services as we know them. People would simply toss their waste, including the contents of their chamber pots, out of their windows and into the street below. The air is heavy with the stench of decay and smoke from workshops and kitchens. These weren't just unpleasant places. They were breeding grounds for disease. As you navigate these streets, the brutal social hierarchy of Rome is impossible to ignore. You might see a wealthy patrician draped in fine dyed linen and accompanied by a retinue of slaves, walking with an air of complete authority. Just a few feet away, a group of barefoot children in ragged tunics might be begging for scraps, their faces smudged with dirt. The contrast is jarring. There was no safety net. If you were poor, you were on your own. This stark inequality wasn't just economic. It was carved into the very fabric of society, dictating where you could live, what you could eat, and what justice you could expect. And that brings us to the ever-present threat of violence. As dusk falls, the city becomes even more dangerous. The streets are poorly lit, with only the flickering torchlight from a passing wealthy person or the dim glow from a shop front to pierce the gloom. The dark alleys become the domain of thugs and robbers. Walking alone at night was an open invitation to be mugged, or worse. The city guard, the vigils, were more of a fire brigade and night watch than a police force. For the average Roman, personal safety was a personal responsibility, and fear was a constant companion in the shadows of the city. Even a symbol of Roman culture, like the public baths, held a dirty secret. We imagine them as serene, spa-like retreats. The reality was much more crowded and unhygienic. Hundreds of people would pack into the same pools, the water growing murkier and dirtier as the day went on. Imagine a massive, hot, steamy public swimming pool that is rarely, if ever, chlorinated or fully drained. The air is thick with steam and sweat. While the baths were a vital social hub, they were also a perfect place to pick up skin diseases, infections, and all sorts of other ailments. It was communal, but it was far from clean. So when we look at that breathtaking panorama of ancient Rome with the golden sunrise hitting the marble temples, it's important to remember what's just out of frame. The glory and the grandeur were real, but they were built upon a foundation of grit, grime, and hardship. The Roman Empire was a marvel of engineering, law, and military might. But for the millions who called its capital city home, daily life was a relentless struggle. It was a world of incredible beauty and incredible squalor, of high ideals and harsh realities, all existing side by side. The true story of Rome is not just in its monuments, but in the chaotic, smelly, dangerous, and vibrant streets where ordinary people lived, worked, and died. It's a far more complex and, frankly, more human story than the one we're often told. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this glimpse into the real ancient Rome fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We'll keep diving deep into history. Just a quick reminder to hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. What part of Roman reality surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Ever wondered what it was really like to wake up in ancient Rome? Forget the epic battles and grand political speeches for a moment. Let's talk about daily life, because whether you were a wealthy patrician or a struggling plebeian, your morning routine, your home, and even your bathroom habits were worlds apart. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of history and explore the stark contrasts of everyday Roman life. We'll step inside the luxurious villas of the rich and the cramped apartments of the poor. We'll look at what they ate, how they bathed, and the invisible dangers they faced every single day. Was it all marble statues and lavish feasts, or was it a constant struggle for survival? Stick around, because the reality is more fascinating and sometimes more shocking than you might think. Let's start with where you'd live. If you were one of the lucky few, a patrician, you'd call a magnificent villa home. Picture this. You walk through a grand entrance into an open-air atrium, sunlight streaming down into a central pool. The walls around you aren't just plain plaster, they're covered in breathtaking light. These weren't just decorations, they were status symbols, depicting epic mythological scenes with vibrant colors and incredible detail. You'd see heroes, gods, and intricate patterns, all painted by master artists. Your home would be a sanctuary of space and beauty, with marble columns, mosaic floors, and separate rooms for dining, sleeping, and relaxing. It was a private world of comfort and luxury, far removed from the noise and chaos of the city streets. But for the vast majority of Romans, life was anything but luxurious. Most people were crammed into apartment buildings called insulae. Imagine multi-story structures made of timber and cheap brick, leaning precariously over narrow, dirty streets. These buildings were notorious fire hazards and often poorly constructed, with constant risks of collapse. Smoke from countless cooking fires would stain the exterior, and the overall impression was one of grit, grime, and overcrowding. There were no grand atriums here, just a constant struggle for space in a city packed to the brim. This was the reality for the average Roman citizen, a world away from the serene patrician villa. So, what was it like inside one of these insulae? Forget personal space. An entire family would often share a single, small, dark room. The walls were rough clay, and the only light came from a tiny window or a smoky oil lamp that filled the air with soot. Your furniture would be basic and functional: a simple wooden bed frame, some pottery jars for storing water and food, and perhaps a few woven baskets. A small hearth in the corner might be used for cooking, making the room constantly smoky and stuffy. This wasn't just a place to sleep. It was where you were born, where you ate, and where you lived your entire life, shoulder to shoulder with your family in incredibly close quarters. And when it came time to sleep, comfort was a foreign concept. You'd be lying on a straw-stuffed mattress laid over a simple wooden frame. The blankets were coarse, rough linen, and you wouldn't be sleeping alone. These mattresses were breeding grounds for pests like lice and bedbugs. In the dim, flickering light of an oil lamp, you might even see them crawling round. Sleep was often fitful and uncomfortable, a far cry from the plush, clean bedding the wealthy took for granted. Waking up in an insula meant rising from a bed that offered little rest, in a room filled with dusty air and the lingering smell of smoke as the weak morning sun struggled to pierce through a tiny, grimy window. Now, let's talk about hygiene, a topic with some surprising twists. One of the great equalizers of Roman society was the public bath, or army. Both rich and poor could enjoy these magnificent public complexes. Imagine vast, echoing halls with high vaulted ceilings and marble pillars. Sunlight would stream in, illuminating the steam rising from the pools. This was the Roman equivalent of a community centre, spa, and gym all rolled into one. People came here not just to get clean, but to exercise, socialise, conduct business, and relax. For a small fee, anyone could escape the grime of the city and enjoy the luxury of hot, clean water. For the poor, it was a daily blessing, a moment of comfort and cleanliness they couldn't find at home. However, the Roman approach to sanitation wasn't all steamy baths and clean marble. Let's talk about the toilet. Most insulae had no private bathrooms. Your option was a public latrine. Picture a long stone bench with a series of holes carved into it, right next to each other. There were no stalls, no privacy. You'd sit there, shoulder to shoulder with strangers, doing your business while a channel of running water flowed beneath to carry the waste away. And for cleaning up, forget toilet paper. Everyone shared a communal sponge on a stick called a pressorium. After use, it was simply rinsed in the same channel of running water and left for the next person. While innovative for its time, it was an absolute breeding ground for bacteria and disease. This brings us to one of the biggest dangers of Roman life. Disease. While the aqueducts were an engineering marvel, bringing water into the city, not all of that water was safe to drink. The public fountains where the poor collected their daily water could easily become contaminated. With primitive sanitation and a limited understanding of germs. Waterborne illnesses like cholera and typhoid were rampant. You'd see people, some already showing signs of sickness, crowding round these fountains to fill their clay jars. The very water they needed to survive could also be their undoing. Life in the crowded streets of Rome was a constant gamble with your health, where a simple drink of water could lead to a fatal illness. So, when we look back at ancient Rome, it's crucial to see both sides of the coin. There was the grandeur we see in movies, the opulent villas, the stunning art, and the architectural marvels like the public baths. This was the Rome of the powerful and the wealthy, a world of privilege and comfort. But there was also the other Rome, the one experienced by the masses. A world of precarious housing, cramped living conditions, unsanitary facilities, and the constant threat of disease. It was a life of resilience and hardship. Understanding this duality gives us a much richer, more complete picture of what it truly meant to be Roman. It was a civilization of incredible achievements, but also one of immense inequality. Thanks for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this glimpse into Roman life fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into history. Yes, now we are moving on to the living conditions in ancient Rome, which were characterized by both the magnificent infrastructure and vibrancy, and the challenges of excessively crowded, noisy, and dangerous street life. Ever wonder what it was really like to walk the streets of ancient Rome or a medieval city? Movies often show us grand temples and epic battles, but the everyday reality was a wild mix of incredible innovation and downright misery. Let's take a journey back in time to explore the good, the bad, and the ugly of daily life in these fascinating eras. Imagine standing in the 1st century, looking out over the Roman Empire. One of its greatest marvels wasn't a temple, but its roads. A vast, impressive network of stone-paved highways connected the entire empire. These weren't just dirt tracks. They were engineering masterpieces, built in layers, designed to last for centuries. And then there were the aqueducts, massive, graceful arches marching across the landscape, carrying fresh water for miles into bustling cities. This was classical Roman engineering at its finest. A testament to a civilization that could reshape the natural world to serve its people. It was a world of order, connection, and ambition. But step off that magnificent highway and into the heart of a city, and the picture changes dramatically. The streets of both ancient Rome and medieval towns were often a nightmare. Picture narrow alleys packed shoulder to shoulder with people. Down the center runs an open sewer, a disgusting channel of waste and filth. Wooden carts, heavy and uncontrolled, rumble past dangerously close, their drivers shouting to clear a path. The buildings loom over you, casting the street in shadow. The air is thick with smells you wouldn't want to imagine. This was the gritty, chaotic reality for the average city dweller. Let's go back to those amazing Roman roads for a moment. They weren't just for show. They were the arteries of the empire, allowing for something previously unimaginable: fast, efficient travel. For the military, this was a game changer. Legions could march at incredible speeds along these long, straight roads, reaching distant frontiers to defend borders or put down rebellions. Milestones marked the distance, and trade wagons carrying goods from across the known world shared the same routes. It was a system that fueled commerce, communication, and military might, holding a vast empire together. But travel wasn't always so simple, especially after the central authority of Rome weakened and the Middle Ages began. Even on what passed for a road, the journey could be slow and perilous. Imagine your cart getting stuck in deep, muddy tracks after a heavy rain. You're far from any town, exposed to the elements, and completely vulnerable. And then, from the dense forest at the roadside, armed bandits emerge. Robbery was a constant threat for travelers, and without a legion marching nearby, you were on your own. Travel became a risky gamble, not a routine journey. Of course, life wasn't all just roads and sewers. The cities, for all their flaws, were hubs of vibrant public life. In ancient Rome, the Forum was the heart of it all. Imagine the energy. Crowds gathering to watch gladiators make their grand entrance into the amphitheater. Street performers juggling or acting out plays, and vendors shouting to sell their wares. It was a spectacle for the senses, surrounded by majestic columns and grand public buildings. People from all walks of life, senators in togas, merchants, soldiers, and slaves mingled in a dynamic, bustling social scene. But that same bustling crowd had a dark side. In the packed market streets of both Rome and medieval cities, the sheer density of people was overwhelming. You'd be constantly jostling, pushing your way through a sea of bodies. This chaos was a pickpocket's paradise. While you were distracted by a shouting vendor, a skilled thief could lighten your purse without you feeling a thing. The noise, the crush of the crowd, the constant need to be on your guard could be an incredibly stressful and unpleasant experience. The vibrant city was also a place of constant low-level threat. Let's look closer at that marketplace. It was the engine of the city's economy. In a Roman forum, merchants would set up stalls, selling everything you could need. The smell of freshly baked bread would mix with the salty aroma of olives and wine stored in large clay amphorae. In the middle of it all, a public announcer might be reading the latest news or decrees from a scroll, his voice booming over the din. Roman guards would patrol, keeping a semblance of order. It was a loud, chaotic, but organized system of commerce that kept the city fed and supplied. But the noise wasn't just in the market. The soundtrack of an ancient or medieval street was relentless. Imagine the constant, deafening rattle of heavy wooden carts on uneven stone pavement. Add to that the shouting of people trying to be heard over the racket, the clang 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 of a blacksmith's hammer from a nearby workshop, and the endless barking of stray dogs. It was a cacophony that started at dawn and didn't let up. There was no escape from the noise. It was an ever-present part of urban life, a stark contrast to the quiet we often seek today. Even with all the noise, the city was the center of information. In an age without internet or newspapers, how did you know what was going on? You'd go to the public square. Here, a town crier would announce the latest news, royal proclamations, or local laws. People gathered to listen, discuss, and spread the word. Around them, the daily life of the city swirled. Merchants calling out their prices. children chasing each other between the columns, friends catching up. It was a lively communal atmosphere where you were always connected to the pulse of your community. But that connection and noise never ever stopped. As day turned to night, you might hope for some peace and quiet. You would be disappointed. The city after dark was just as loud and a lot more dangerous. The streets, lit only by flickering torches, were still filled with the sound of rattling cartwheels as people tried to get goods into the city under the cover of darkness. Drunken citizens would shout and sing their way home from taverns. Dogs would bark at every shadow. There was no true silence, no quiet moment to yourself. The clamour of the city was a 24/7 reality, a constant assault on the senses from which there was no escape. So, the next time you think of the past, remember this duality. For every incredible Roman aqueduct, there was a filthy open sewer. For every efficient military road, there was a bandit-infested forest path. And for every vibrant public festival, there was the constant grinding noise and chaos of the streets. It was a world of brilliant highs and desperate lows. And understanding both gives us a much richer and more realistic picture of what life was truly like. Thanks for joining us on this trip back in time. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more historical deep dives. Yes, we continue. Ever wondered what people ate in ancient Rome? Was it all lavish banquets and exotic feasts like we see in the movies? Or was the reality for most people something entirely different? Today, we're going to journey back in time, not just to see the grand monuments, but to explore the kitchens, markets, and dinner tables of both the rich and the poor, from the height of the empire to the struggles of the Middle Ages. We'll uncover a story of opulence and scarcity, of incredible engineering and daily hardship, all told through one of the most fundamental human needs: food. Let's dig in. Picture this: a lavish Roman dining room, a plinium. The air is thick with the scent of spices and roasting meat. Wealthy guests, dressed in fine tunics and stolas, recline on couches around low tables. The walls are covered in vibrant frescoes, the floor a masterpiece of mosaic tiles. Servants move silently, bringing platter after platter of delicacies. We're talking roasted peacock, stuffed dormice, bizarre but popular tree-tanned sweet dates from distant lands. The tables are laden with gleaming silver plates and delicate glassware, all illuminated by the warm, flickering glow of oil lamps. It's the very picture of opulence. But if you look closely, in a shadowed corner, you might see a simple clay bowl of pools, a basic porridge. This is the meal for the enslaved attendants, a stark, silent contrast to the feast they're serving. This single scene shows the immense gap between the haves and the have-nots in Roman society. Now, let's leave the luxurious villa and walk into the Suburra, one of Rome's poorest and most crowded districts. The scene changes dramatically. The streets are narrow, muddy, and chaotic. The streets are narrow, muddy, and chaotic. Here, a family sits on their doorstep for their evening meal. There's no reclining on couches, no silver platters. They share a single coarse loaf of dark bread and a communal bowl of lentil porridge. The food is monotonous, the same thing day in and day out. Their clothes are worn, their bowls made of simple clay. In the background, a painted notice on a wall might advertise a grand public feast or a new shipment of wine, a constant taunting reminder of a life just out of reach. This wasn't just a meal. It was a daily struggle for survival, a reality for the vast majority of Rome's massive population. So, with such a massive city, how did everyone get something as basic as water? The answer was one of Rome's greatest achievements: the aqueducts. Imagine standing at the base of one of these colossal structures, a multi-arched marvel of engineering stretching for miles. You can hear the roar as fresh, clean water brought from hills far away cascades into a public fountain or nymphaeum. This wasn't just a water source, it was a social hub. People from all walks of life, men, women, children, free and enslaved, gathered here, filling their clay amphorae and jugs, chatting and exchanging news. An official, the Aquarius, would be there to oversee the distribution, ensuring this life-giving resource was managed properly. The aqueducts were the veins of the city, a testament to Roman ingenuity that made urban life on such a grand scale possible. But the Roman water system had a dark side. Inside a Roman kitchen or a bustling tavern, if you looked closely at the plumbing, you'd see the pipes were made of lead. This metal, which the Romans called plumbum, the origin of our word plumbing, was easy to work with, but it was also toxic. Over time, lead would leach into the water, especially in the homes of the wealthy who had private connections. We can imagine a close-up on one of these pipes, visible calcification building up inside. Next to it sits a cup of red wine diluted with water, as was the custom. This common practice of adding wine to water may have helped kill some bacteria, but it did nothing to remove the invisible poison. It presents a grim choice. Drink potentially contaminated water or drink wine, which had its own set of consequences. The very infrastructure that supplied life also carried a hidden threat. If water was the lifeblood of Rome, bread was its beating heart. Let's step into a Roman bakery, a pistrinum. The air is warm, dusty, and filled with the comforting smell of baking bread. It's a hive of activity. Large brick ovens radiate heat. Huge millstones, powered by donkeys or enslaved workers, grind grain into flour. Bakers covered in a fine white powder knead dough on long wooden tables. A customer at the counter buys a round loaf, which is marked with the baker's stamp to guarantee its origin and quality. Bread was so central to Roman life that the state implemented the cura annone, a grain dole to provide free or subsidized bread for the citizens. This kept the massive population fed and, more importantly for the emperors, kept them from rioting. The bakery wasn't just a shop, it was a cornerstone of Roman social stability. Now, let's fast forward several centuries. The Western Roman Empire has fallen, and Rome has shrunk into a medieval city. What happened to that all-important loaf of bread? We find ourselves in a dim, sparse peasant hut around the 14th century, a time of frequent famine. A hand holds a piece of bread, but it's a sad sight. The loaf is discolored, gritty. To make the flour stretch further, it's been adulterated mixed with things like chaff, sand, or sawdust. It's barely nutritious and hard to eat. In the background, a child with hollow eyes looks at grain sacks that are nearly empty. The anxiety of scarcity is palpable. In medieval Rome, the guarantee of good, clean bread was gone. For the poor, every meal was a gamble, and the constant threat of starvation was a grim reality of daily life. Without refrigerators, how did people in the ancient world preserve their food? Back in a Roman kitchen, we can see their ingenious solutions laid out like a still life painting. On a stone shelf sits a clay amphora filled with golden olive oil, which not only served as a food, but also as a preservative. Next to it, a glass bottle holds a dark, pungent liquid, garum. This famous Roman fish sauce, made from fermented fish guts, was the ketchup of its day, used to flavor everything. We also see ceramic jars of salted fish, bunches of herbs hanging to dry from the ceiling, and sausages cured and ready to be stored for months. Each item tells a story of preservation using salt, oil, smoke, and fermentation to make food last through the seasons. These methods were essential for survival, ensuring there was food on the table long after the harvest. But even with these techniques, food spoilage was a constant battle, especially in the crowded markets of medieval Rome. Imagine a bustling market square set up in the shadow of crumbling ancient ruins like the Forum. The scene is chaotic. A fishmonger argues heatedly with a customer, gesturing at a fish that's visibly past its prime, swarmed by flies. Nearby, a vegetable seller desperately sprinkles water on his wilted greens, trying to make them look fresh for a few more minutes. Dogs and pigs, the unofficial cleanup crew of the medieval city, sniff around for rotting scraps on the ground. This was the daily struggle. Fresh food was a luxury, and ensuring you weren't buying something that would make your family sick was a constant challenge. The air was a mix of haggling voices, livestock sounds, and the unmistakable smell of decay. Let's step inside a medieval kitchen, perhaps in a fortified tower or a monastery. The challenges continue. The room is dark and smoky, the only light coming from the huge fireplace where a massive cauldron of stew bubbles away. This single hearth is the only source for cooking. Meat hangs from hooks on the ceiling, exposed to the air and any passing insects. But look closer at a cook working in the corner. They are painstakingly picking weevils, tiny black insects, out of a sack of flour before they can make bread. Pests in dry goods were an unavoidable nuisance. The lack of cold storage, the reliance on open fires. The lack of cold storage, the reliance on open fires, and the constant fight against pests and decay made the medieval kitchen a demanding and often unsanitary workplace. Preparing a meal was a labor-intensive, challenging process from start to finish. Our journey through time ends where it began, with bread. We're at a modern archaeological dig in Rome. We're at a modern archaeological dig in Rome. An archaeologist's gloved hand gently holds a loaf of bread. It's black, carbonized, but its round shape and score marks are perfectly preserved. This loaf is 2,000 years old, excavated from the ashes of Pompeii, and as we look at this tangible link to the past, a ghostly image appears in the background, a Roman baker from long ago, placing identical loaves into a fiery oven. In this one moment, the past and present meet. We see the legacy of the Roman diet, not as a story in a book, but as a real object we can hold. It reminds us that the food on their tables, the challenges they faced, and the ingenuity they showed are not so different from our own struggles and innovations today. It's a powerful symbol of how food connects us all across the centuries. Thank you for joining me on this culinary tour through history. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more explorations into the past. Our next topic is the work and economic life section, covering both the positive and negative aspects of slavery and labor systems, trade networks, currency structures, and working conditions in Rome. Have you ever dreamed of living in ancient Rome, the empire of epic battles, magnificent structures, and philosophical debates? But what was daily life really like for the average Roman? Was it all togas and grand banquets, or was there a darker, grittier side we often overlook? Today, we're stepping back in time to explore the raw, unfiltered reality of the Roman world beyond the myths and movies. We'll uncover both the good and the bad, the glorious and the gruesome. This is the Rome you've never seen before. Let's start with the very foundation of the Roman economy, labor. When we picture Roman construction, we see marvels like the Colosseum or the endless aqueducts. These colossal projects were a testament to Roman engineering and organizational genius. Picture it, a massive arch being built with thousands of workers moving in perfect sync. Chained slaves pull enormous stone blocks up ramps, while others carry lime mortar. Engineers in their tunics study blueprints, directing the immense workforce. In the distance, an aqueduct nears completion, a symbol of Rome's power to reshape the landscape. This was the positive side, an incredible capacity for construction that built an empire. But flip that coin, and the picture becomes infinitely darker. Let's zoom in on the edge of that same construction site to a dusty quarry. Here we see the human cost. A single slave, his back scarred with whip marks, breaks stone with a heavy hammer under the blazing sun. His face is a mask of exhaustion and utter despair. A brutal-looking guard watches over him, a constant, menacing presence. This wasn't just labor. It was a life sentence of inhuman conditions, a stark and ruthless reality for millions who were considered mere property. The grandeur of Rome was quite literally built on the broken backs of these individuals. From labor, we move to the lifeblood of the empire, trade. Imagine standing in the bustling port of Ostia. The air is filled with the sounds of a dozen languages and the smell of salt and foreign spices. Ships of all sizes are docked, their holds filled with treasures from every corner of the known world. You see stacks of amphorae holding wine and oil, precious papyrus from Egypt, fine pottery from Gaul, and even ivory from the distant lands of Africa. Customs officials meticulously record every item, managing a flow of goods that made Rome the center of the world. This was the positive side of Roman trade, a vibrant cosmopolitan hub of commerce and incredible abundance. But this system was also rife with risk and deception. Now, imagine a tense scene at a market stall in that same port. A merchant, clad in armor for protection, is arguing fiercely with a seller. He points to a sack of wheat, its contents pouring out mixed with sand, a common trick to cheat buyers. The angry merchant holds up a counterfeit coin, a copper core plated with a thin layer of silver, another sign of the rampant fraud. In the background, a damaged ship is being repaired, a silent reminder of the constant dangers of sea travel from storms to pirates. For every successful merchant, there were countless others who faced ruin, deception, and even death. The promise of wealth came with a heavy price. Of course, trade relied on a stable currency. In the golden age of the empire, the Roman monetary system was a symbol of trust and stability. Picture an elegant shop, a taberna, where a merchant carefully weighs gleaming silver denarius coins on a delicate scale. Each coin is perfectly minted with the emperor's portrait, a guarantee of its value. A satisfied customer uses these coins to purchase a high-quality tunic and a bundle of exotic spices. The entire transaction is smooth, built on mutual trust and the reassuring stability of the currency. This was the system at its best, facilitating commerce across a vast empire. But fast forward to the late imperial era, and the scene changes dramatically. We're now in a squalid slum at a chaotic market. A poor man stares in bewilderment at a handful of large, crude bronze coins. These are follis, practically worthless due to hyperinflation. The prices on goods are astronomical and constantly changing. A small bag of pepper might cost thousands of follis. The man's face is a picture of despair, his money almost meaningless. This was the negative side, economic collapse, where the currency became a symbol of the empire's decay, leaving ordinary people destitute and desperate. What about the average workday? For the Roman elite, life was defined by otium-cultured leisure. Imagine a wealthy Roman enjoying a sunny afternoon at a magnificent public bath, a thermae. He's being massaged by his slaves, who serve him fresh fruit and cool drinks. The walls are covered in stunning mosaics. The pools are made of fine marble. In the background, others exercise or engage in lively conversation. This was the pinnacle of Roman civilization for the privileged few, a life of luxury, relaxation, and intellectual pursuits made possible by the labor of others. But for the vast majority, especially children, working conditions were brutal. Picture a dark, sweltering workshop, an ergasterium. The only light comes from the fiery glow of a glass-blowing furnace. Here, child laborers, their faces grimy and etched with fatigue, toil for hours. They are surrounded by dangers, molten glass, heavy machinery, and the constant threat of a foreman's stick. The air is thick with smoke and dust. This was the grim reality for the poor. It wasn't leisure, but exploitation. A short, harsh life of dangerous work with no hope for a better future. Now, let's turn to a topic that affected everyone, rich or poor: health. The Romans made significant strides in medicine, particularly for their military. Imagine a valetudinarium, an early military hospital. A group of students gathers around a physician, a medicus, as he demonstrates anatomy, possibly on a cadaver. On a nearby table, a set of bronze surgical instruments, forceps, scalpels, bone saws are neatly arranged. This was a place of early scientific inquiry, where practical knowledge was gained to save lives on the battlefield. It represented a rational, systematic approach to medicine. However, for most civilians, healthcare was a gamble, often steeped in superstition. Picture a bustling public square where a healer has set up his stall. Unnervous patient eyes, a jar of writhing leeches intended for bloodletting, and a collection of strange amulets meant to ward off disease. The stall is covered in dried animals, bizarre roots, and other dubious remedies. This wasn't science. It was a world of quackery and guesswork. For every skilled physician, there were 100 charlatans, and a patient's fate often depended on luck rather than knowledge. This lack of scientific understanding made the empire incredibly vulnerable to disease. Imagine a narrow street in Rome during the Great Antonine Plague. The scene is apocalyptic. Bodies are piled high, covered in flies. A weeping woman clutches the lifeless body of her child. Red marks are painted on doors, signaling plague within. The very air feels heavy with sickness and death. This was the terrifying reality of an epidemic in the ancient world. With no concept of germ theory, plagues could sweep through cities, wiping out a third of the population, leaving nothing but despair and devastation in their wake. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming challenges, the Romans demonstrated remarkable foresight in public health. Consider the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's main sewer system. We see workers cleaning this massive underground channel, a true engineering marvel that carried waste and stormwater out of the city. This colossal infrastructure project, built centuries earlier, was fundamental to Rome's sanitation. It helped prevent the spread of waterborne diseases and allowed a city of 1 million people to exist. It was a triumph of public works, a testament to the Roman understanding that a healthy city required grand solutions. But what happened when prevention failed and injury struck? Let's go to the front lines, to a surgical tent in a legionary camp. A soldier, wounded in battle, is about to have his arm amputated. There is no anesthesia. He bites down hard on a leather strap to stifle his screams. The military doctor, the medicus castrensis, prepares his sharp, clean instruments. The soldier's face is a mask of terror and agonizing pain. While the doctor is skilled, the procedure is brutal and primitive. Without sterilization, the risk of infection after surgery was incredibly high. This was the grim, painful reality of ancient emergency medicine. Finally, let's look at the most fundamental human experience, birth. But in Rome, it was fraught with peril. Picture a dim room in a modest home. A young mother lies exhausted in bed after a difficult labor. The midwife sadly wraps a stillborn baby in a shroud. Simple birthing tools and good luck amulets lie useless nearby. The infant mortality rate was shockingly high. Perhaps only half of all children survived to adulthood. For mothers, childbirth was one of the most dangerous moments of their lives. This intimate scene shows the profound sorrow and loss that was a common part of family life. But life, in its resilience, always finds a way. Let's return to that same house a few months later. A different story is unfolding. The mother has recovered and is now breastfeeding a healthy, lively baby. The grandmother cradles the infant, her face filled with joy. The father arrives, bringing a bulla, a protective amulet to be placed around the child's neck, a symbol of hope and a prayer for a long life. The room is filled with warmth and the strength of family bonds. Amidst all the hardship and loss, this is the enduring spirit of humanity, resilience, hope, and the profound love that holds a family together. So, the next time you think of ancient Rome, remember it wasn't just one thing. It was an empire of staggering contrasts. It was a place of brilliant engineering and brutal slavery, of incredible wealth and grinding poverty, of scientific progress and deadly superstition. By seeing both the light and the shadows, we get a much truer, more human picture of what it was really like to live in the Roman world. Thanks for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history. See you next time.
In the continuation of the video, we witness how Rome's order, built on law, fractured under harsh punishments and class divisions, descending into the shadows of nightlife and leaving behind a lasting legacy of contradictions.
Step into the world of ancient Rome, a civilization of unparalleled grandeur and enduring influence. We often marvel at its achievements, the mighty legions, the sweeping aqueducts, the epic poetry. But beneath the gleaming marble of the Forum and the triumphant arches lay a darker, more complex reality. Tonight, we journey beyond the well-trodden paths of history into the shadows of the eternal city. We'll explore the stark contrasts of Roman life, from the heights of imperial power to the depths of human suffering. This is Rome as you've never seen it before, a city of light and shadow, order and chaos, justice and brutality. Let's begin in a sunlit basilica, the heart of Roman law. Here, in a hall of grand columns and soaring ceilings, an advocate argues his case with passion and reason. Before the magistrate lie the codified scrolls of law, a testament to a society that valued order and process. Citizens watch from the galleries, witnessing a system designed to deliver justice, a cornerstone of civilization that echoes in our own courtrooms today. This was the ideal, a world governed by reason. But for many, the law was not a shield. It was a cage. Descend with me into the Mamertine prison, a cold, damp dungeon carved from rock beneath the city's streets. Here, a chained prisoner, thin and broken, huddles in the suffocating darkness. Desperate words are scratched into the stone walls around him. Through a small grate, he can see only the feet of people walking free in the sunlight above. This wasn't just a holding cell. It was a place of misery, a prelude to a grim fate. And that fate was often a public spectacle. Picture the Tarpeian Rock, a sheer cliff overlooking the Forum. A condemned criminal is dragged to the edge. Below, a crowd has gathered. Their faces show a chilling mix of horror, morbid curiosity, and indifference as the sentence is carried out. Imperial guards stand impassively, their presence a reminder that this brutal display is an instrument of state power. Justice here is not a quiet, reasoned process, but a violent public performance meant to instill fear. Roman society itself was built on a rigid hierarchy, a great chain of being that was seen as the natural order of the world. Imagine a grand procession along the Via Sacra, the sacred way. The emperor, clad in royal purple, leads the way. Behind him march the senators, their togas marked with a broad purple stripe. Then come the equestrians, the business class, and finally, the common citizens. Each group is distinct, their place in the world clearly defined by their clothing and position. For the Romans, this structure wasn't oppression, it was stability. But from another perspective, this order was a source of profound inequality. Let's step into the home of a wealthy patron. He reclines comfortably as a line of his poorer clients files in for the morning greeting ritual. They bow, heads lowered, desperately hoping for a small handout or a favor. The contrast is stark, the patron's luxurious ease against his client's anxious humility. There's an unbridgeable gulf between them, a daily reinforcement of dependence and powerlessness. The foundation of this entire system rested on the backs of the enslaved. Journey to a vast agricultural estate, a latifundia. Inside a sweltering mill, a man turns a massive grindstone. He is branded a mark of property with chains on his ankles. An overseer stands nearby, whip in hand. The man's face is a mask of blank endurance. He is not a person, but a tool, a piece of human machinery driving the Roman economy. This was the brutal reality that made the wealth and leisure of the elite possible. Yet even in this rigid world, there were moments when the social order was playfully turned upside down. During the festival of Saturnalia, the city erupted in joyful chaos. Slaves and masters feasted together. Citizens of all classes wore the freedman's cap. and a statue of the god Saturn was paraded through the streets. For a few brief days, roles were reversed, gifts were exchanged, and the entire city shared in a communal celebration. It was a sanctioned release valve, a way to unify the populace through shared ritual and joy. But not all religious gatherings were so open. In the 3rd century AD, to be a Christian was to live in constant danger, deep beneath the city, in the winding tunnels of the catacombs. A small group gathers by the flickering light of a single oil lamp. Their faces are tense with fear as they share the Eucharist. On the soft stone walls, they've carved simple symbols of their faith: a fish, a shepherd. Here, faith is not a public spectacle, but a secret whispered in the dark, where the light of belief is a fragile defense against the ever-present threat of persecution. Meanwhile, above ground, religion was a powerful tool of the state. Witness the dedication of a temple to the deified Emperor Augustus. Priests in elaborate robes sacrifice a bull before a colossal statue that blends the features of the emperor with those of Jupiter, king of the gods. Senators and officials perform their worship, a public display of loyalty. Here, religion and politics are one and the same. This isn't about personal faith. It's about compulsory devotion to the state, a grand piece of propaganda carved in stone. As daylight fades, Rome transforms. Let's pull back for a moment and gaze upon the city from a distant hill, with no electric lights to pollute the sky. The sleeping metropolis is a dark mass under a spectacular, star-dusted Milky Way. Only a few faint glimmers from the oil lamps of the wealthy dot. The landscape, it's a vision of profound peace and cosmic grandeur, a reminder of the universe's silent, majestic presence over the human world. But down in the streets, the darkness holds dangers. Plunge into a narrow, pitch-black alley in the Suburra, the city's crowded slum. A lone traveler holding a small lamp walks nervously. From the shadows, a figure emerges, a dagger glinting in the faint light. Piles of trash line the walls, and the air is thick with suspense. This is the fear that stalked every Roman who ventured out after dark, the threat of robbery and violence lurking in every unlit corner. Not all nightlife was so menacing. Step inside a bustling taberna or tavern. The air is warm and smoky, filled with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of game pieces, and the music of a double flute. People from all walks of life drink wine from simple clay cups, escaping the pressures of the day. It's a picture of community and camaraderie, a warm, golden-lit haven from the outside world. But stay a little later and the scene can curdle. The same tavern is now a scene of chaos. A drunken brawl has erupted. Tables are overturned, wine spills across the floor, and two men grapple violently as others cheer them on. The good-natured revelry has descended into aggression and loss of control. It's the dark side of escape, a reminder that the line between celebration and violence can be perilously thin. The legacy of Rome is a paradox. On one hand, its contributions are undeniable. Look at the image of a Roman basilica with its columns and scrolls of law. Now, see how its form echoes in the facade of a modern Supreme Court building. The architectural lines connect across millennia, a clear visual symbol of how Roman principles of justice and governance became the bedrock of our own legal systems. Yet, we must also carry the memory of its darkness. Look closely at your hand holding your smartphone, a device connecting you to the world, and in its reflection, see the ghostly image of that Roman slave forever turning the mill. This stark image connects our modern, interconnected lives to the ancient oppression that built an empire. It's a sobering reminder that progress is not guaranteed, and the foundations of our comfort can be built on forgotten struggles. But now, it's time to let these visions of the past recede. Let the starry sky over the Colosseum dissolve into the soft, welcoming texture of a pillow in a quiet, modern bedroom. Feel the world of ancient Rome fade, leaving only a sense of peace and a return to the comfort of the present. A visual sigh of relief. And as we settle, let's hold one final image. A single, flickering oil lamp, the kind an ordinary Roman might have used. Its flame wavers, casts a final wisp of smoke, and goes out. The light, like the error, is gone. But the lamp itself, the simple, humble object, remains. It stands for the quiet resilience of ordinary people whose lives formed the true, enduring substance of history. Now, as your eyes close, you might see the shadow of a laurel wreath on your wall, cast by a streetlight, slowly dissolving into the dark. The line between the present and the past softens and blurs. Faint afterimages might flicker behind your closed eyelids, the pattern of a mosaic. The curve of an amphirecos of history being processed by the sleeping mind before fading completely to black. Our journey ends with a single worn Roman coin resting on a dark surface caught in a sliver of moonlight. Its features are smoothed by time and countless hands, a tangible piece of a single, ordinary life from that immense and complex world, a final, silent artifact of the past. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the shadows of Rome. Follow 4 more explorations into the hidden corners of history. Sleep well.